In pretty standard fashion for this year, I completely forgot to do this video until several months after the season finished, so while I write other longer videos, I might as well get this one out now because, why not? So yeah, there was a second season of Komi Can't Communicate, which started in April. I didn't keep up with it as religiously as I did the first season on account of the fact that Spy Family and Kaguya-sama Lovers War were happening at about the same time, but I still definitely tried to keep up to date with it because, you know, I still really like this show. So what did I think of this season of Komi? Well, okay, that sounds negative. At the time it was coming out, my reaction to it was a little on the lukewarm side, but watching it again for this review made me fall in love with the show all over again. Now, I still think the second season is a bit of a step down from the first for a couple of reasons, but A, I don't think the change in quality is too drastic, and B, I kind of expected it to. That's not a diss on the show. It's just that the first season was so strong in my mind that I thought it would be a tough act to follow. But this season, for the most part, does extremely well. It's only a couple of things that are less good, so I'll get the whining out of the way pretty quickly. And no, I'm not gonna really talk about episodes 10 and 11. We all know the animation took hit in those episodes, but there's a reason for that. The director fell sick, they were behind schedule, they had to essentially turn it in as it was. I'm not gonna harp on someone for doing their best with the situation they're dealt. And the thing is, it doesn't detract massively from the enjoyment of the show in my experience. I mean, sure, everyone looks kinda dopey in these two episodes, and the animation is janky, especially in episode 11, my goodness. But the emotional beats all still land, so it's not a total travesty. I wonder if the Blu-ray releases of the series will do what home media releases of JoJo's have done and go back and fix some of the animation. I guess we'll see. With that said, let's move on. But first, if you want to support this channel, I am pleased to announce that you can do so through the Lo-Fi Media Reviews Patreon. I know, you're probably out here trying to watch a video without being asked to subscribe to something, but hear me out. Through my Patreon, not only will you get early access to my videos once I actually start uploading more consistently, but you will also get an inside look as to my process of making these videos. This includes clips from work in progress videos, stuff that doesn't make the cut of existing videos, audio bloopers, and even the notes I take when watching content for this channel. On top of all that, you'll be able to lodge video requests, so if there's something you're dying to hear me cover, you can tell me and I will put it on the list. There might also be polls for what you want me to do next. I don't know, I'm still working this stuff out. To tell the truth, working out exactly what to put up there isn't easy. So not only will you be getting all this, but you'll be supporting this channel, for which I would be very grateful. So swing by my Patreon. It's a little sparse at the moment, but once I actually get a little more active here, I'll be more active there. Okay, ad read over, back to the video.
Every step you take, I'll be watching you.
Oh wow, am I sick of this crazy fucker? I know that Yamai sucks isn't exactly a hot take in the Komi fandom. From what I can tell, disdain for her is the pretty general agreement. Going into this season, I was hoping we didn't have to see too much of her, but oh boy did I get the opposite of what I wanted. Because she is in almost every episode, and her antics this season are, for my money, even worse than the last season. Now, occasionally, she can be funny. I can think of one line where she tells Najimi to go fuck themselves that was actually pretty funny. The whole rivalry she has with Naka certainly has its moments, but these moments are few and far between, and the rest of it just pains me. On several occasions, she tries to just straight up sexually harass Komi in front of everyone, like trying to look up her skirt and even going so far as to try to take a photo, or telling Komi to her face,
"Take them titties out because I'm trying to see them."
And it's played off as a joke, like it's just, fucking Yamai, am I right? But it's actually pretty horrifying. It leaves me wanting nothing more than to dropkick this yandere piece of shit through the goalposts of hell. I'm not really sure what the insistence on her character in this manner is adding to the show anymore. To begin with, I figured it was about the struggle of having befriended someone who's just blatantly toxic and not being sure what to do about it, but the more Yamai appears, the less I'm sure it's about that, and the more I think it's just a little bit of cheap comedy. Which is frustrating because the show is usually pretty funny organically, so it doesn't actually need to go for this Mineta style LMAO pervert comedy at all. Not that any show really needs to, you fucking know what I mean. It's also frustrating because some of these jokes come dangerously close to being at the expense of Komi, especially the one about Yamai trying to feel her up. Just ew, stop it. Fuck off, Yamai. It becomes even more annoying when a method by which she could become an interesting character is presented to us through the aforementioned feud she has with Naka. On paper, there's a great idea about two people who butt heads because they haven't unpacked some deep-set insecurities that they have. This plotline would be greatly in keeping with the themes of the show. But no, that's largely just played for laughs too, which occasionally comes at the expense of Naka's character too. All in all, I can't stand Yamai. Fuck off, yandere. Going into this season, I was a little bummed out. Knowing how animes operate, I knew that we were going to be losing the gorgeous OP that this show started with. I couldn't really imagine Komi without Cider Girl's Cinderella, but all the same, I had my hopes high for the new song. It might take me a little bit to get used to it, but it would still be a belter, right?
Sorry guys, The song sucks.
Okay, I'm being hyperbolic for comic effect here, but for real, I don't really like this song much at all. It's just kind of annoying, I think. Actually, that's about all I have to say about the song. It annoys me, and it bums me out that that's how I feel, but here we are. And this on its own wouldn't even be that offensive. I watched the show on Netflix primarily. Yeah, I know Netflix fails the show on some points, but if not for them, I'd have never watched the show. So the skip intro button does exist for a reason. It feels mildly blasphemous to do that on an anime, but this OP annoys me enough to do that. But the show also keeps bringing the OP back as part of the soundtrack of the show in general, so you can't even escape it that way. And all of this would be fine, if not for the fact that the visuals of this new OP are also kind of a mixed bag. There's stuff to like, such as the first half being animated to look like an old 90s camcorder with a couple of shots drawn in a kind of 90s style to boot, but the whole thing is brought down by some extremely obvious asset reuse in the character animation. This animation of Agari, for example, is literally copy and pasted from the first episode. This shot of Komi falling is taken right from the first OP, just as this shot of her jumping is. It feels like it was slapped together very quickly, rather than the first OP that clearly had so much work put into it. Is this Netflix's fault? I feel like somehow it is. But the good news is, the new ED does not suffer the same fate. In fact, I love it. Now, in my review of the first season, I didn't mention its ED much. This was on account of the fact that I didn't really like it. I didn't hate it or anything, I just didn't find it terribly interesting. But that couldn't be further from the case here. Fantastic Youth song for this ED is so incredibly pretty, and it is quickly becoming one of my more played songs of the year. In fact, I think I may like it more than the Cider Girl song from the first OP, and that's going some. When paired with this animation that subtly shows the evolution of Komi's friendships in this gorgeous art style, it just exudes this sweet, calming feeling that is pretty close to the beauty that was the original OP and is absent from the new OP. Now on to the really good stuff. Back in my original video of this series, I made a bit of a big deal about the use of cat imagery in this show, mostly because I happen to really love it and thought it was pretty cool. For summary, my general thesis was that the reason the anime uses this imagery is because, much like Komi, black cats are often seen as mysterious and a little scary, when in actual fact they're just like any other cat and deserving of exactly the same kind of love as any other cat. When I went to promote this video on TikTok, I used that specific clip of the video, and someone called me an English teacher, the implication being that I was reaching.
Did you just... the curtains were bloomy? In my own fucking house.
But then this season rolled around, and now I think if you're not seeing that black cats are a symbol for Komi, you're watching this show with your eyes shut or something. Because wow, is it obvious? And I'm not saying that to make fun of it, because I love this imagery. Now I'll get the obvious out of the way, where in the OP, Komi is walking down the street and then in a quick cut is replaced by a black cat. If that doesn't tie the two together, I don't know what will. But then there's an insert at the end of episode 12 that made it all the more explicit. In this little scene, a black cat is sitting alone when a tabby cat approaches it, smiling and meowing. A couple of seconds later, they're shown sitting together watching the students of Eton begin their next year of school. I wonder who these cats are supposed to represent. A black cat and an ordinary cat. I wonder what this could mean. It's Komi and Tadano. As I said, it's pretty on the nose stuff, but I love it anyway because it's beautifully drawn and I will always love anything cat related in a show I'm watching. One thing I really noticed this season is if there's something that this series does exceptionally, it's non-verbal storytelling. Now, this might sound obvious. It's a series about a girl who doesn't talk much. You'd kinda hope it can do non-verbal storytelling. But this series is honestly a masterclass in the style, and the non-verbal sections of some episodes stand out as the most memorable moments in said episodes to me. Unless you're watching it in dub, in which case the narrator won't shut the fuck up in these moments, killing the mood entirely. But I'm not talking about the dub right now. For one thing, the non-verbal sections really give the sheer expressiveness of this show's art style time to shine. Now, even in the more verbal sections, this quality of the animation and art style is obvious. I've mentioned before that I'm amazed how much expression the show pulls out of Bug-Eyed Komi, for example. But these non-verbal sections really help to underline this. Take this little section at the beginning of episode 4 where Komi drags Shosuke along to the shops to find a present for a Christmas party. There's this little exchange that it happens entirely in close-ups of Komi and Shosuke, close-ups that seem pretty blank. But the expression is so well integrated into the art and animation, you know exactly what is happening between them. Guess what? Oh no. You're coming shopping with me? Oh my god, are you serious? I think these little vignettes also help to show that part of what makes the show so damn funny is the direction. Of course, a lot of the humor around the misunderstandings everyone has is hilarious, but allowing the directors to tell a load of jokes without any words proves how versatile this show's comedy is. This is especially true for the shopping story. There's a shot of Komi running around excitedly in the background while Shosuke's in the foreground looking bored as hell, and it's hilarious for, siblings am I right, relatability reasons. The other thing these little vignettes prove is that there is a lot of story that that can be told without words. A lot of the series is about how Komi is searching for the courage to communicate with the people around her, with a lot of emphasis on her trying to use her voice to speak to people. But if there's anything these non-verbal sections show, it's that sometimes you don't need words. There have been hints of this in the first series. There's a lovely moment in episode 5 where Komi and Tadano just sit together enjoying each other's company. There's that nice emphasis on the fact that Komi and her father don't need words to communicate, which seems to be equally true for her and Shosuke, by the way. But allowing the anime to continue for several minutes without any dialogue really helps to underline that idea. You don't need any words to show that Shosuke goes from not taking Komi's shopping particularly seriously to actually wanting to help when he sees how much she's invested in making her friends happy. You don't need words for Komi, Tadano, and Najimi having a good time in the snow. Sometimes, comfortable silence is all you need. By the way, this is equally true for the manga too. There are lots of little chapters that proceed with little to no dialogue, one of which is absolutely my favorite chapter of the lot I've read so far that didn't get animated. What the fuck, guys? Back in its first season, I noted that one of the things that made me fall in love with the show was its touch in dealing with all kinds of social anxiety people might be going through without anybody seeing it. From putting on a melodramatic front to try and communicate with people, to panicking over tripping over words. This season follows in that vein beautifully, and actually on occasion improves from the first season in this respect. Some older characters are expanded on in really lovely ways, and some new characters are added as well, bringing more dimension to the show's exploration of anxiety. I think I talked about this ad nauseum in my first video on the series, but I am still in love with this show's approach to the idea of social anxiety. It's reasonably common for media to portray the concept with a sort of one-size-fits-all, oh, I'm scared of talking to people. Oh no, I can't keep that. I can't fucking keep. Oh fuck. Making it pretty hard to find a character who actually feels realistic in this respect. To the credit of writers today, we're moving further away from that. O.J. Hayward in Jordan Peele's Nope was probably the most realistic introvert I've ever seen in a feature film ever, for example, and was played to perfection by Daniel Kaluuya. There'll definitely be a video about that film somewhere down the line, by the way. But my point is, in general, writers and actors tend not to know what the hell they're doing when it comes to writing and portraying social anxiety, leading to the standard people scare me for no reason, take pity on me characters that I'm growing a little tired of. And this is why I got so attached to this show. I mean, sure, it does ooh-ooify Komi's anxiety a little bit because, you know, anime character, but the base of the character writing never feels anything but sincere, and that makes all the difference. You know what, before we move on to other characters, let's talk about Komi's development a little bit, because I am proud of her. I had some concern going into this season that the writing of Komi's anxiety was going to grow stagnant. In some ways, I would have understand why if it did. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But to my relief and delight, the show doesn't do that, instead expanding Komi even further and breaking her out of her shell even more. She still remains the same anxious Komi, but she's pushing herself to do more, and I am proud of her for that. I'm probably going to proceed through this in episode order, because that's how my notes are written out, and if I let myself think in multiple directions at once, I'll just get distracted and I'll never finish this video. So, the season actually opens on a really good gag involving Komi's anxiety, which is one where she plays a prank on Tadano by brushing her cold hand against him and then stepping away as he goes, "Holy shit, what the fuck was that?" It's an extremely simple setup, but there's a lot going on in it that I really love. For a start, it reinforces a character trait of Komi's that's already been implied by the first season. Remember back in episode 7 of season 1 where Komi plays a prank on her dad? Well, there it's established that she's actually a bit of a cheeky shit and enjoys a good joke here and there. I speculated in my video on that season that we don't see much of that because she's too socially anxious to play jokes on her classmates and only does with her dad because they have an established comfortable relationship. And this scene pretty much sets that in stone. Komi gets pranked by Najimi, sees Tadano and thinks, ha, I'm gonna get him good, but then gets anxious about playing the joke. However, this time she works up the courage to play the joke and gets Tadano. What exactly is the point I'm trying to make? Is that while she's still incredibly anxious, she's beginning to warm up to the people around her, and more of her true personality is beginning to show from under the blank slate that her anxiety is projected onto everyone else. The more comfortable she gets with people around her, the more she feels like she can be herself. Am I reading too much into a blink and you miss it gag? Maybe, but it works, so whatever. Another moment I really love in terms of Komi's anxiety comes in episode 7 when the field trip is announced. While Komi and Tadano and Najimi walk home, they discuss previous field trips, and Komi says that her junior high school trip went to Kyoto. Moments later, she tells Tadano over the phone that she'd lied about going to Kyoto, and that her social anxiety had been so bad in junior high that she'd skipped out of the field trip because she didn't want to be a bother to the group she'd been assigned to. Two things leap out at me about this scene that hit really close to home. The first is the fact that that Komi felt the need to keep that from Tadano. This might be seen as a little strange, given that Komi and Tadano's friendship quite literally begins with Komi oversharing about her social anxiety and how much it haunts and controls her life. Why would she become so closed off now? Well, the answer is simple. She doesn't want to worry Tadano. This, like everything else Komi does apparently, is extremely relatable. One frustrating side effect of being socially anxious is that it doesn't matter how close you are to someone, even if they are your best friend in the whole world. Telling them when you're going through it can still be the hardest thing in the world, even if you previously told them when you were. Yes, Komi has told Tadano about her lifelong struggle with social anxiety. She knows he'd understand if she explained that she'd never gone to Kyoto, and in a way this new field trip was dredging up some really awful memories. But it's still really hard to actually say it. A lie is just easier. But then she traps herself in the guilt of having lied to a friend, so she immediately tells him to rectify the situation and face that hardship of telling her friend how she feels. It really feels like something ripped from the pages of my own life, as does my next point. The way Komi describes her anxiety around being in that group is gut-wrenching. It was already sad when she said she was all alone in junior high and that she barely knew any of the people she was in a group with, but then she describes not even knowing what they thought of her because she couldn't look them in the eyes. Maybe they hated me, she says, or maybe they just didn't care. I think I would have been happier with that. This was infinitely relatable. My high school life was plagued with feeling such a nuisance that I wanted to just disappear, for people to just ignore me. I also genuinely didn't know what people actually thought of me, and like Komi, my first guess would have been that they hated me. Oddly enough, the most relevant example of this would also be in a field trip setting, where I got to talking to someone in my class while on a field trip to Europe, and then just assumed she hated me moments later. Something that I guess I must have let slip because one of my friends alleged that she was hurt that I thought she hated me. Okay, I know I get really comfortable with you guys on my Komi videos, but I promise it's to make a point that Komi's social anxiety isn't just a character gimmick. It's real. It's written violently well, and I relate to her to an extent that hurts on occasion. If more socially anxious characters were this realistic, I think the stigma around social anxiety might actually be lifted somewhat. I just love this character writing, and if it ever takes a hit in favor of jokes at her expense or blatant flanderization, I will be crushed. The biggest improvement is in the form of Inaka. In her episode in season 1, I can't say I really understood where the show was going with her. She seemed pretty one note, and she felt to me like the first classmate of Komi's who would be easily forgotten amongst the cast of strange people she was surrounded with. But in this season, she has a few really nice moments, some of which are small, but there's one in episode 5 I really love. As has been established by previous episodes, Inaka is a girl from the country who goes to school in the city for reasons that aren't elaborated on in any fashion. Her anxiety is that she's going to get bullied for being a country girl, so she does her absolute best to hide it. The running joke being that she's doing a pretty shit job of hiding it actually, and the other students just don't particularly care and even find it kinda cute. But what this season seems to be doing is giving Inaka a through line of learning that it's okay to own the fact that she's from the country. On the field trip, she's paired with Onamine and Otori, who ask her heaps of questions about where she's from. Inaka stresses out about it, but it's made pretty clear that Onamine is just looking to know more about her and to make her feel more comfortable about herself. But my favorite moment is, as I mentioned earlier in episode 5, when Komi and Inaka end up working at the same temple by the power of extraordinary coincidence. Inaka's immediate reaction is the assumption that Komi would knock on her to everyone at school and get everyone to bully her for being a hick, and tries her best to pretend she's someone else. However, when she sees that Komi is struggling with interacting with the customers of the temple, she drops the act and just tries to help her out. At the end of the day, Komi thanks her by name, and Inaka realizes that Komi knew who she was the whole time and feels better about herself. This whole moment strikes a really nice balance with Inaka's anxiety. It informs her that she's got nothing to be worried about, that she will be accepted by everyone around her for being a country girl, but it doesn't trivialize her anxiety either. The show does really well at making us understand her fear. Sure, there are a couple of jokes about her outlandish conclusions being drawn from nothing, but these jokes aren't made for us to go, haha, look at Inaka, isn't she fucking stupid? Instead, the joke lands because we go, haha, yeah, me. This is a much better portrayal of the character, as to my eye anyway, her initial appearance did rely a little bit on laugh at the country girl humor rather than being sympathetic to her. So it was really nice to see her character getting handled better here, and now I get what they're going for with her, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of her, especially since she seems to be a good friend to Komi. Much like last season, this season introduces quite a few new characters and explores their particular quirks when it comes to how social anxiety influences their lives. A lot of them are fun, but I won't be talking about all of them on account of the fact that for most of them, there isn't much for me to pull apart really because they're reasonably self-explanatory. Katai's character pretty much speaks for himself, for example, but there are a couple of characters that I want to specifically point out because they struck me as being pretty relatable. The first of these characters, by sheer force of arbitrary choice, is Ayame Sasaki. Okay, so the setup for what's interesting about Sasaki is a little bit silly, but I find it fun nonetheless. See, Sasaki sees Komi being mildly harassed at a movie park and wants to step in to save her with a yo-yo, but is too embarrassed of her yo-yo habit, so she buys a mask to wear while trying to rescue Komi. As I said, the setup is kind of silly, but it does work because the writers don't just make it a case of, oh, she's embarrassed of her yo-yo, but also give some ground for that fear. A flashback tells us that she was bullied in primary school for playing with yo-yos, the kids basically telling her it's so last year before going to play with Beyblades. Let it rip, am I right, guys? This adds a little dimension to Sasaki and makes her a lot more relatable. I feel like a lot of people can relate to having someone make fun of an interest you have in your youth and then going out of your way to continue to hide said interest in the interest of passing normal. I mean, not me though, I have the opposite problem. If you know me, you will listen to the stories of the things I love. I'm pretty awful like that. Sorry. Actually, no, I do relate in some ways. I can tweet up a storm about how much I like anime, but when I'm talking to people in real life, I'm a lot more guarded about talking about it because, well, I think if they know I'm an anime guy, they'll think I'm
some kind of deviated prevert.
You know, because the anime fandom has that reputation amongst other people. But the general point I'm making is that Sasaki represents a couple of things: the desire to appear normal and the damage that words can have on people. You know how people say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Well, that's a load of bollocks. Words sting more than anything else sometimes, and they can lead to us trying to fundamentally change ourselves or hide a part of ourselves, even if it's over something trivial, be that playing with yo-yos or anything like that. Huh. I had less to say about Sasaki than I thought. Oh yeah, I also relate to her in that she's a chaotic shit-stirring bastard. Finding out one of her friends has a crush and using that against them? Oh yeah, I'm not innocent of that. If it wasn't obvious already from season 1, it is now. Komi and Tadano are down catastrophically for each other. But what this series does better than a lot, I think, is show the evolution of their feelings pretty naturally and realistically. Sure, as viewers, we're all yelling at them to just kiss already, but the pacing doesn't feel dragged down in any way. My favorite thing about how this show portrays their budding relationship is the way it shows that they're still putting together how they feel about each other. Most of the season revolves around them realizing that they do in fact have feelings for each other and not really being sure what to do with that. We'll begin with Tadano because his tomfoolery around his emotions happens slightly before Komi's. And by slightly, I mean there's a difference of a couple of minutes. The first suggestion that he's really in love with her is in the bit where these three dickheads are sitting around discussing fantasies of what it would be like to date the girls in their class. By the way, before I go ahead with the serious analysis, I just want to say that this fantasies joke is really funny and actually surprisingly accurate to how these conversations really go down from my memory of high school. Also, there's a gag about Tadano being aware of the cutaway inserts to the fantasies, and that's just really funny to me. Anyway, Tadano being down bad. I feel like I don't have to elaborate too hard on the fact that Tadano's ideal day with Komi ending up being just them doing shit around the house together is evidence that he's in love with her, but I find the approach the scene takes to the concept interesting. The other guys are pure stressed out about not being able to think of an ideal date for Komi, and Tadano just idly goes, I wonder what dating her would be like, and lands on the most wholesome possible outcome before having a panic attack and dismissing it from his mind. Now, there have been suggestions of a bit of a crush, like him wanting to save Komi going to the cat cafe as his lock screen, but I think here is where the show makes it super obvious that he's in love with her. However, it's not obvious to Tadano. Not yet. And this continues to ring true. I think we can all say we've had this happen to us at least once, where we've gone, no, they're just a really good friend. Sure, I think of them all the time, I want to be around them all the time, but they're just my really good pal. And this show applies that to Tadano perfectly. Even with the Valentine's chocolate, Tadano's denial is able to fall back on, well, she gave all of her friends but me chocolate, so I'm sad that I got left out, as opposed to what he's really feeling. She didn't give me chocolate because she doesn't like me. But it's in the build-up to White Day that he finally has to look his denial in the eye and come to terms with the fact that, yes, he does like Komi. Also like that it's his little sister that finally smacks that denial out of him. I was so sure that Sho was winding up for a cheap, haha, Hitomi thinks he's gay, isn't that a silly misunderstanding, along the lines of Chika, Shirogane, and Hayasaka and Kaguya-sama Lovers War, but I like that she recognized that Tadano was talking about Komi and essentially beat it out of him that he does like her. Not only is it better than a cheap gay joke, but it's also realistic to sibling relationships too. Those little shits will pick up on the tiniest things and then pressure you on it like you wouldn't believe. As for Komi, her thing is a lot less denial and a lot more not being socially aware of what she's feeling. The seeds are planted in her mind super well, with her getting flustered after the I love you game and wishing Tadano had actually said it. And then there's the whole incident with Tadano's sick day that I think is one of my favorite moments in Komi's development overall, when she impulsively holds Tadano's hand for a second and then spends the better part of the next episode stressing the hell out about it. Her letter to Najimi is especially telling in that she's desperate to clear up the situation with them. This could just be read as a case of social anxiety leads you to over-explain yourself sometimes, which is definitely a very real real and very relatable part of it. But I think a part of it is she's trying to convince herself as well that there was nothing to it, that it was just a gesture of comforting a sick friend. Part of her knows full and damn well it wasn't, that it was much more than that, but she wants to convince herself that there's a perfectly innocent explanation for it, because looking those feelings in the eye is going to be scary, because as the field trip episode seems to imply, she doesn't really know what these feelings are. Speaking of the field trip, this would be the moment where she realizes she does have a crush on Tadano, because Kato and Sasaki pretty much spell it out for her. All that confusion, I guess is the word I'm looking for, comes into focus when they describe what a crush is, and her panic at realizing yes she does like her friend is, again, pretty realistic. From there, now she's got another level of awkwardness in what exactly to do with that. Now, obviously, her nervousness about giving Tadano chocolate on Valentine's Day is because she knows for him, it's not friend chocolate. She says it is, but at this stage she knows it isn't. I think in a way, her telling him that she gave him the best of the batch was an attempt at saying it's more than friend chocolate without going through the terrifying ordeal of actually saying it's not. You know when you're socially anxious and you desperately want to tell the person that you like them, but you can't say those exact words, so you try and say it in other ways? What, just me? Incidentally, Tadano was doing the exact same thing with the hand cream gift to Komi on White Day. He can't say that he likes her explicitly, so he gives her a really, really nice gift that is sending all the signals that he's into her while covering it up with a, well, it's just a return gift. The most interesting part about Komi's feelings for Tadano is that she's pretty shit at hiding them. I mean, so is Tadano really, but Komi's social awkwardness means it's pretty understandable that she misses the hints. Nobody pays attention to anything Komi does on account of them worshipping her, so they don't see it. Tadano, however, is pegged by the series as being able to read Komi almost perfectly, except about her feelings for him. There, he's completely clueless. Is this inconsistency? Nope. In fact, it makes perfect sense to me. On my initial review of the first season of this show, a commenter left a very good analysis of Tadano from the point of view of rejection, and how it's informed the way he behaves going forward. The general gist of this breakdown is that Kawai's rejection of Tadano in junior high so crushed his self-confidence that not only did he start passing himself as just your average Joe, but also so much that he doesn't really have any notion in his mind that girls would have any interest in him. If you apply this analysis to Tadano in this season, his behavior around Komi makes perfect sense. In general, yes, Komi's hint to him with the chocolate should have been the most obvious thing in the world to him, but Tadano's self-confidence is so low that he just doesn't see the hints. They can't possibly mean what they seem to mean, so it's just Komi being anxious as usual in his mind. It's pretty sad really, and it's my hope that as the series continues, his self-confidence builds enough for him to realize that yes, it is possible that Komi loves him. The general gist of all this is despite possible aggravation of just wanting them to get it over with and admit it to each other, I also feel that doing so too early would cheapen their relationship. Komi and Tadano need to build up to that point organically, and so far the show is doing an expert job at that. Once again, I leave this review omitting a lot of stuff, but this time it's because I don't think there's much more I can add to a lot of stuff this season because it's all reasonably self-explanatory. However, there are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight here. For example, I really like the idea of Amami Sato. Seeing a character who'll always help everyone else but will never ask for help for herself was a smack in the face because I found myself relating to her all too much. I also really appreciated the bus guide Ryoko, as not only was it a nice reminder that yes, adults can be anxious too, but also a super important message in general, that even if it doesn't seem like a lot of people are paying attention, there'll always be someone who will recognize what you're doing, be it listening to your tour guide speech or, as I applied it to myself, someone to see the things that you create and appreciate them. It's part of why I appreciate all of my viewers so much. That got sappy, didn't it? All in all, this was another strong season of a show I really love. I can't wait to see if it gets picked up for a third, and if it does, I can't wait to see these guys in motion once again, and to see Komi and Tadano's relationship develop. I don't really have an ending for this video. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe and ring that bell and all that stuff, and I will see you later.